Hello, I hope all of you are doing well. My name is Shriya Bansal and I'm currently working as a software engineer at Microsoft, and I'm also an educator at Re-Level. So now, in this video, after having already talked about the first normal form and the second normal form, we are going to start with and talk about the third normal form, okay? So if you have not watched the first and the second normal form video, I would first recommend to watch those videos first and then come over here, because all of them are a procedural step process, right? So you need to watch the first and the second normal form first in order to come over here. So let's quickly start with our discussion with 3NF. So it says that third normal form is basically an upgrade to the second normal form. Okay. So when a table is in second normal form and it also has no transitive dependency, then it is known to be in the third normal form. Okay. That means the rule says that in order for a table to be in 3NF, two rules should be followed. First, that it should be in 2NF, and second, there should not be any transitive dependency. Okay, there should not be any kind of transitive dependency. If you remember the rule for second normal form, it was that the table should be in first normal form and there should not be any partial dependency, whereas the word that we are using over here in 3 normal form is transitive dependency. Okay. So again, the best way to learn this topic is by taking an example only. So we'll quickly take an example and try to understand how do we convert a table which is in second normal form to take it to the third normal form. Okay. So here the example says that we have 3 tables. Again, we have the student table, we have the subject table, and we have the score table. So when we talk about the score table, it has the score ID, it has the student ID who has scored that marks, and it has the subject ID for what subject the student scored the marks, and then in the end we have the marks itself. After that, we have the students table where we have the student ID, we have the name of the student, we have the registration number, we have the branch, and then we have the address. Apart from that, we have a subject table as well, which has the subject ID, the subject name, and the teacher who teaches that subject. Okay, so this is pretty much what my database really looks like. This is what pretty much my DBMS has designed all my databases and my tables. Okay. Now over here in the score table, we need to store some more information. Okay, which is, let's say, the exam name. Okay, let's say you have the subject ID, but you also want to know what was the name of the exam and the total marks right over there. So let's add 2 more columns to the score table. Okay, here we have added exam name column also and total marks as well. Now I already told you that the requirements for the third normal form are that the table should be in third normal form if it is in second normal form and it does not have transitive dependency. Okay. Now, but the question is, what is transitive dependency, right? In order to make sure transitive dependency does not exist, we first need to understand what exactly is it, right? Because when we know what exactly is it, then we'll be able to remove it very easily as well. Okay, now let's take a look. The moment we added exam name and total marks, right, to the score table, it saves more data now, correct? Earlier it was storing less data. The moment you add more columns, the amount of data stored in a table also increases, right? Now the primary key for the score table is actually a composite key. You remember we discussed in the partial dependency I think part, where when we consider the score table, the student ID alone or the subject ID alone is not enough to uniquely identify a record, right? You need to know both the student ID and the subject ID in order to uniquely identify a tuple. So it says that the primary key for our score table is actually a composite key. That means that it is made up of two attributes or columns. Okay, that is student ID plus subject ID. Now, the moment you add exam name, right? Now, exam name is an attribute. It depends on both the student and the subject, right? For what subject are you giving the exam and what student is giving the exam, right? For example, a mechanical engineering student will have workshop exam, right? But a computer science student won't, right? Now here, and for some subjects, you have practical exams, and for some, you do not have practical exams, right? That is why when you're giving an exam, the name of the exam also is dependent on the student ID, right? Whether the student is a part of CSC, whether the student is a part of IT, whether the student is a part of mechanical, and also it depends on the subject ID, right? Whether it's a practical exam or a non-practical exam, right? So exam name is dependent on both the, I would say, primary key or composite keys. And now let's think about the second column. Okay, the second column that we added is total marks. Okay, now does it depend on our score table's primary key? We have to check if total marks if somehow is related to student ID or subject ID. Okay, now well, the thing is that the total marks actually depends on the exam name. Okay, as the exam type, with exam type, the total score changes. For example, practicals are of less marks, right? While theory exams are of more marks. Total marks says that what is the total amount of or the maximum amount of marks you can gain, right? Let's say there is a 100 marks paper and you gain 30 marks over there, right? So total marks is 100 and your own marks come in the marks section. Okay, so now what happens is that the total marks actually depends on the exam name, right? It depends what exam you're giving, and based on that you will get the total marks. But exam name is actually just another column in the score table, right? It is not a primary key and it is not even a part of primary key, but still total marks is dependent on it. That is known as transitive dependency. It's like A is dependent on B, right? And B is dependent on C, right? So it's like you added two columns, exam name. Exam name is dependent on both subject ID and student ID. Okay, it is dependent on both. And over here, we added another column, total marks, where total marks is dependent on exam name. It is neither dependent on any of the primary keys or the composite keys, right? In that case, this is a typical situation of transitive dependency, where a column is not directly related or dependent on the primary keys. It is in fact dependent on any other column which is neither a part of any of the primary keys. Okay, here you can see it says again that exam name is just another column in the score table. It is not a primary key and it is not even a part of primary key, right? And still total marks depends on it. Okay, this is known as transitive dependency. When non-prime attributes, right, depends on other non-prime attributes rather than depending on prime attributes. Okay, so here you can see that this is a prime attribute. This is a non-prime attribute. Okay, and this is also a non-prime attribute. So transitive dependency as a concept says that when a non-prime attribute, right, actually depends on another non-prime attribute. Here total marks dependent on exam name. Rather, it should actually happen that non-prime attributes should depend on prime attributes. right? Now, if this kind of a situation happens, it is known as transitive dependency. And you always have to make sure that never in your tables you do have transitive dependency present. Okay. Now here we need to know how do we remove transitive dependency, right? Again, the solution for this is very simple. Take out the columns exam name and total marks from the score table, right? And make another table which is known as exam table, right? And use exam ID wherever it is required. Okay, so the new exam table will basically have the exam ID, right? Every exam will be given an ID, whether it's a workshop exam, a mains exam, a practical exam, and the total marks. And whenever you need to use that data, right, you use that exam ID in the score table instead of actually using the exam name and the total marks. Okay, so that is how it basically works over here, right? Now, how did it really help over here was that, again, first of all, we did not have to write exam name again and again everywhere and total marks again and again everywhere, right? Multiple students could be giving the same exam. So you would have to write the same exam again and again, and you will have to write total marks again and again. Here, you are just using exam ID, and it is helping you to not write a lot of redundant code. All right. Now here, what are the advantages of removing transitive dependency is that the amount of data duplication is reduced considerably, right? And the data integrity is achieved as well, right? All the 4 integrity laws or the integrity rules that we discussed are achieved as well. Okay, so let's just quickly iterate on what the third normal form is. For a table to be in third normal form, it has to be in second normal form, and it does not have any transitive dependency as well. What is transitive dependency? When a non-prime attribute is actually dependent on another non-prime attribute, right? Such is a situation we call as a transitive dependency, right? It should never happen, and we have to ensure that in a third normal form, there should not be any kind of transitive dependency. And what is a simple solution to remove transitive dependency is that we introduce a new table altogether, right? And where we store a particular ID, right, which is the exam ID, right, and use that exam ID wherever required instead of storing the redundant data again and again in the score table. Okay, so that is how you always have to make sure that your tables are designed, right? Because when you get rid of partial dependency, when you get rid of transitive dependency, right, the moment you get rid of all these things, right, the level of duplication and the level of redundancy in the database reduces automatically. Okay, that is why it says as well that the moment you remove transitive dependency, you have no data duplication and the data integrity is achieved as well. Okay, and that is why we are going to the above level and going till third normal form. Okay, so I hope this is clear to everyone, right? And I hope you understood the overall idea behind third normal form as well. Just understand it in this way, that the very idea is quite simple to understand, right? When we talk about the first normal form, we are just looking for atomic values. When we talk about second normal form, we are just going to make sure that it's a second step process. So the first step should be done, that it should be in 1NF, and there is no partial dependency. Partial dependency goes by the fact that you should be fully dependent. All the other attributes should be fully dependent on the primary keys or the composite keys. And the third NF basically says that there should not be any transitive dependency. It's like A is dependent on B and B is dependent on C, right? That kind of transitive dependency should not be present. Okay, so I hope by this time you understand all the 3 types of normal forms. The best way again to learn is to take multiple examples, try out on your own, see how different scenarios would work, right? And take out multiple examples. Let's say now you can take the example of a hospital system where there are doctors, where there are infrastructures, medicines, right? Many other things are present, and based on that you can understand whether you can achieve at least till third normal form by watching the videos you've seen so far. Okay, and if you are able to do, that means you do actually very well understand the concept. Okay, and that's the very goal as well. So the more you practice, the more you actually understand the overall idea. Okay, all right, then we'll just keep it this much for here for this video. Thank you so much for attending. Now I'm going to meet you in the next video now, where we are going to talk about Boyce chord normal form. We've already had a video where we had talked about 12 rules of, 12 chord rules which are defined. So make sure you check out that video as well, and I will meet you in the next one.